This is your brain. Your brain is made of cells, and the cells in the brain are called neurons, which work in a unique way that allow us to do all sorts of things like learning, thinking, and moving around. Neurons are connected like roads, and your thoughts travel down them like cars. Your brain isn't just neurons, though. There are other cells called glial cells that make neurons work the way they're supposed to. The glial cells are like the construction crews of the brain. They make sure the roads, stoplights, and signs are working correctly. Without glial cells, cars, your thoughts, would not be able to get down the road and travel towards where they need to be. When most people think of the brain, they only think of neurons, but glial cells are just as important.
The way that information is sent around the brain is similar to the way a computer sends information. When you click a mouse or type on the keyboard, information is sent using an electrical signal that the computer can read. Cables are used to connect the mouse to the computer, just like nerves are used to send information from the outside world to our brains. And in our brains, neurons are connected to each other like a bunch of extension cords that pass the signal from one to the next. Much like the cables that we use for our computers are covered in a material like plastic, the neurons in our brain are covered with myelin, a material made by cells called oligodendrocytes. Your brain also has special cells called astrocytes. Astrocytes surround the synapses, which are the spaces where two nerves connect and where there are gaps in myelin. The astrocytes work like sponges and maintain normal levels of chemicals in the brain. They form a barrier between the rest of your body and your brain. This is called the blood-brain barrier. Even after you've grown up, your brain keeps changing and making new neurons. So you also have radial glia to make sure baby neurons move to where they need to be. The last special type of cell in the brain are called microglia, and they act like vacuum cleaners to remove anything that shouldn't be in the brain. Think of them as the antivirus program you can install to make sure your computer runs the way it's supposed to. These glial cells, oligodendrocytes, astrocytes, microglia, and radial glia allow neurons to function properly.
Your brain is very complex and made of interconnected cells called neurons. Electrical signals travel along the neurons until they reach synapses, which are the spaces where one neuron connects to another. So that would be this spot right here. At these synapses, the electrical signal causes the neuron to release neurotransmitter, which is a chemical signal. The neurotransmitter then binds to the next neuron, so this chemical signal is converted back into an electrical signal. This happens all the way down a chain of connected neurons. Although neurons are the cells that send information in the brain, in order to operate correctly and efficiently, the brain requires special cells called glial cells. These cells are the astrocytes, oligodendrocytes, radial glia, and microglia. As we can see here, astrocytes are cells that look like stars and can make up around half of the volume of the brain. They have many important roles. They help to maintain the ion concentration and clear the synapses of excess ions and neurotransmitter. Astrocytes also control the flow of blood throughout the brain. Astrocytes are also responsible for forming the blood-brain barrier, which protects your brain from any pathogens or dangerous products floating around in your blood, and work as the selective filter that allows blood into the brain while also protecting it. Without astrocytes, the neurons in our brain would not be able to effectively transmit information. The next cells are called oligodendrocytes. So if this is a neuron, then this cell here is called an oligodendrocyte. Oligodendrocytes work by wrapping around neurons and producing a substance called myelin, which will insulate the neuron. This will help to speed up the electrical transmission of information, much like the way that electricians wrap electrical wires to make sure that they send signals quickly. Myelin is wrapped around neurons. The myelin sheath improves conduction velocity and maintains the strength of the electrical signal by making sure that current does not leak out of the neuron. Your brain is constantly producing new neurons, and when this happens, the new neurons are actually formed underneath the layers of neurons that are already there. These new neurons then have to migrate up to their respective cortical layers in order to function correctly. So these cells are called radioglial cells, and their job in the brain is to work as a scaffold, as we can see here, and then later throughout the development. And then this scaffolding will allow the correct migration of new neurons and ensure that they integrate into the correct cortical layer. The last cell type are microglia, and they have several functions, but they're mostly involved in the immune responses in the brain. The microglia act as scavengers and remove debris in order to mediate an immune response in the brain. So if we ever have any sort of debris or items that should not be in our brain, the microglia will come and get rid of it all. They're also responsible for secreting cytokines, which are immune chemicals that cause inflammation. This inflammation has been seen to cause some of the damaging effects of Alzheimer's disease. Without these glial cells, including the astrocytes, the microglia, the radioglia cells, and the oligodendrocytes, the neurons would not be able to perform their functions properly.